The glass doors of the luxury hotel slid open, just as a tired voice broke through the morning rush. "Sir, could I please have a bottle of water?" Most people never looked up. They walked around the old man as if he were part of the sidewalk. His gray beard was uneven. His army jacket had faded almost white around the shoulders. A weathered backpack rested against his leg, and beside him sat a German shepherd with cloudy brown eyes that never left his owner. The dog wasn't begging. He was watching, waiting, protecting. A black SUV rolled to the curb. Valets hurried forward. The hotel manager straightened his tie before the passenger door even opened. Everyone knew who was arriving. Ethan Caldwell, founder of Caldwell Technologies, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America. Every magazine called him brilliant. Employees called him demanding. The internet called him impossible to impress. As Ethan stepped onto the sidewalk, conversations stopped. The valet reached for his briefcase. The manager smiled too hard. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. Your conference room is ready." Ethan barely nodded. He had another 12-hour day ahead of him. A board meeting, 2 investor calls, a charity luncheon he didn't even want to attend. His eyes stayed fixed on the hotel entrance until he heard the same quiet voice again. "Sir, just some water." Without looking, Ethan reached into his pocket. He pulled out a $20 bill. "Someone get him whatever he needs." The old man didn't reach for the money. "I don't need cash." His voice stayed calm. "I just need water for my dog." The German shepherd lifted his head, but never made a sound. For the first time, Ethan looked directly at them. The man's face was deeply lined. Sunburn had stained his skin. His hands shook slightly from exhaustion. Then Ethan noticed the chain around the man's neck. 2 scratched military dog tags rested against his jacket. One tag had turned almost black with age. The other caught the sunlight just enough for a single name to become visible. Ethan froze. The sounds of the city seemed to disappear. Traffic, voices, car horns, everything faded. He stared at the tags. His breathing slowed. No. The word escaped before he realized he'd spoken. The hotel manager looked confused. "Mr. Caldwell?" Ethan didn't answer. His eyes never left the old soldier. The veteran noticed him staring. "You okay, son?" Ethan swallowed. His hands had started shaking. Where did you get those dog tags?" The old man frowned. "They're mine." Ethan took one slow step closer. "Your name." The veteran lifted the tags and glanced down. Daniel Brooks. The name hit Ethan like a punch. Daniel Brooks. A name he hadn't heard in 23 years. A name his father had whispered on his deathbed. A name connected to a promise that had never been kept. The German shepherd suddenly stood and moved between Ethan and the veteran. Not aggressive, just careful. Daniel rested a gentle hand on the dog's back. "It's okay, Ranger." The dog relaxed instantly. Ethan stared at the shepherd. Even the dog's name felt familiar. His heart raced faster. He remembered old photographs. A younger soldier laughing beside another Marine. A German shepherd puppy sitting between them. It couldn't be, could it? The hotel manager cleared his throat. "Should I call security?" Ethan turned so quickly that the manager stepped backward. No. His voice was sharper than anyone had ever heard. "No one touches this man." The sidewalk fell silent. People waiting for taxis began watching. Hotel employees exchanged nervous looks. Ethan slowly faced Daniel again. "When was the last time you had breakfast?" Daniel shrugged. "Yesterday, I think." "And your dog?" "He ate before I did." The shepherd's ribs showed beneath his fur. Still, the dog stood tall, still alert, still guarding his owner. Ethan opened the hotel doors himself. "Come inside." Daniel blinked. "I don't think they'd like that." "They will today." The manager hurried over. "Mr. Caldwell, the lobby." I said, "They're coming in." The manager immediately stepped aside. Guests looked up from their coffee as Daniel entered the marble lobby. Designer luggage rolled past worn-out boots. Business suits past a patched military backpack. Some people stared, others quietly looked away. Ranger never left Daniel's side. A young hostess approached carefully. "I'm sorry, sir, but pets aren't usually—" "He's a service dog," Daniel answered softly. The hostess nodded without another question. Ethan led them into the hotel's private dining room. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished tables. Fresh flowers filled the room with the smell of lilies. Daniel hesitated at the doorway. "I've never been somewhere this fancy." "You are now." A waiter appeared. Ethan ordered without opening the menu. "Bring breakfast." "For two?" "For three." The waiter looked confused. Ethan pointed at Ranger. "And a steak for him." Daniel's eyes widened. "You don't have to do that." "I know." For several moments, neither man spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy. Ethan kept looking at the dog tags. Daniel noticed. "You've been staring at these ever since outside." Ethan nodded. "My father wore the same ones." Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "Your father served?" "He did." "What was his name?" Ethan looked down. His voice became almost a whisper. "Michael Caldwell." Daniel stopped breathing for a second. His chair creaked as he leaned back. "No." Now it was Daniel's turn to stare. "Little Mikey?" Ethan looked up. Nobody had called his father that in decades. "You knew him?" Daniel laughed once, a broken, surprised laugh. "Knew him?" He rubbed a hand across his eyes. "He saved my life." Ethan couldn't move. Daniel slowly reached into his backpack. The zipper caught twice before opening. Inside were old newspapers, a folded American flag sealed in plastic, several worn photographs. He searched carefully before pulling out one faded picture. Two young Marines stood shoulder to shoulder, covered in mud, smiling despite everything. Between them sat a German Shepherd puppy. Daniel handed the photo across the table. "That's your father." Ethan picked it up with trembling hands. His father looked barely 20, young, strong, happy. Nothing like the tired man Ethan remembered from his childhood. Daniel smiled faintly. "We were brothers over there." "You served together?" "Every day." Ethan stared at the picture. "My father never talked about the war." Daniel nodded slowly. "Most of us didn't." The waiter returned carrying plates of eggs, toast, bacon, fruit, and coffee. Another employee placed a fresh bowl of water beside Ranger. The old shepherd drank slowly, almost gratefully. Daniel smiled. "Thank you." Ethan watched Ranger finish every drop. Something tightened inside his chest. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this unsettled. His assistant suddenly rushed into the dining room, holding a tablet. "Mr. Caldwell, the board meeting starts in 5 minutes." He didn't even look at her. "Cancel it." Her eyes widened. "Cancel? All of it?" "My entire schedule." "But investors flew in from—" "I heard you." She hesitated. "You've never canceled a meeting." "I'm canceling today." She quietly walked away. Daniel shook his head. "You shouldn't lose business because of me." "It's not because of you." "Then why?" Ethan looked at the old photograph again. "My father died before he could explain something." Daniel's smile disappeared. "He wanted to." "What do you mean?" "The last time I saw him." Daniel stopped. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. His eyes drifted toward the hotel windows. Outside, people hurried through another ordinary morning. Inside, 23 years of silence waited between two men. Daniel took a slow breath. "He made me promise I'd find you someday." Ethan's heart skipped. "But I never could." He reached into his jacket pocket. His hand closed around something small, something he had carried for decades. When he placed it on the table, Ethan's face turned pale. It was half of an old military challenge coin, broken cleanly down the middle. Daniel looked at it without blinking. Then, with shaking fingers, he opened another pocket. He pulled out the other half. And when the two pieces touched, they fit perfectly. Neither man spoke. The two halves of the old coin rested in the center of the table, like they had been waiting 23 years for this moment. Ethan stared at them. Daniel stared at Ethan. Ranger lifted his head, sensing the silence had changed. Finally, Ethan found his voice. "My father kept that in his desk." Daniel nodded slowly. "I kept mine everywhere I went." "You knew they matched?" Daniel smiled sadly. "We broke it the night we promised each other something." His thumb brushed over the worn metal. "We figured if either one of us ever needed the other, we'd know we were family." Ethan swallowed hard. "My father never told me that." "He wouldn't." "Why not?" Daniel looked toward the windows again, because he blamed himself. The words landed like a weight. "For what?" Daniel let out a long breath. "For leaving me behind." The room seemed smaller. Outside, sunlight bounced off expensive cars. Inside, the years peeled away. "It was our third week on patrol," Daniel said quietly. "Everything was normal, until it wasn't." His voice stayed calm, but his eyes drifted somewhere far away. "We heard the explosion before we felt it." Ethan listened without interrupting. The road disappeared under us. Smoke, dirt, screaming. Daniel's fingers tightened around his coffee mug. "I couldn't feel my legs." He paused. "I thought I was dying." Ranger slowly rested his head against Daniel's knee. The old veteran smiled at the dog without looking down. "Your father came back." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" He had already reached the evacuation helicopter. Daniel's voice cracked for the first time. "They told him nobody survived where I was." He looked at Ethan. "But he jumped off anyway." Ethan's heart pounded. "He ran back through gunfire." Daniel's eyes glistened. "He dragged me almost a quarter mile." Silence. "He carried me when I couldn't walk." Another pause. "And when another explosion knocked both of us down," Daniel looked at the coin. "He covered me with his own body." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "My father never mentioned any of this." Daniel smiled faintly. "Heroes usually don't." The words echoed through Ethan's mind. His father had spent the last years of his life working double shifts at a machine shop. He never called himself brave. He never talked about medals. He never complained about the limp that got worse every winter. To Ethan, he had simply been Dad. Daniel reached into his backpack again. "This is why I wanted to find you." He carefully unfolded a yellow envelope. Its edges had almost turned brown. The paper inside looked even older. Ethan recognized his father's handwriting immediately. His chest tightened. "I've seen that writing my whole life." Daniel nodded. "He gave this to me the day we came home." Ethan reached for the letter, but stopped. "You never opened it?" "I promised I wouldn't." "For 23 years?" Daniel smiled. "A promise is still a promise." Ethan looked at the sealed envelope. His own name wasn't on it. Neither was Daniel's. Only 4 words. "If I don't return." A chill ran through him. "But my father did come home." Daniel nodded. "He did." "Then why didn't he take it back?" Daniel's face grew quiet. "Because he couldn't." Ethan looked confused. Daniel rubbed both hands together. "The war wasn't what broke him." He glanced down at the letter. "What happened after did." Before Ethan could ask another question, someone cleared their throat. A woman stood at the entrance to the private dining room. She looked to be in her early 60s. Simple blue dress, silver hair tied back, hotel name tag pinned neatly to her sweater. She had been standing there long enough to hear part of the conversation. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Her eyes stayed on Daniel. I know you." Daniel looked up. For a moment he seemed puzzled. Then recognition slowly spread across his face. "Mary?" The woman covered her mouth. "Oh my goodness." Daniel slowly stood. I haven't seen you since the VA hospital. Daniel nodded. You were the night nurse. Mary smiled through watery eyes. You disappeared. Daniel laughed softly. So did life. She walked closer. I've wondered for years if you were still alive. I'm stubborn. I can see that. They hugged carefully, the kind of hug shared by people who had seen each other on the hardest days imaginable. Ethan watched quietly. Mary turned toward him. Your father visited him every week. Ethan blinked. What? After they came home, Daniel looked down. Mary continued. He never missed a Thursday. My father told me he worked late every Thursday. He did afterward. She shook her head. But first he came to the hospital. Daniel closed his eyes. I told him to stop. Mary smiled sadly. He never listened. Ethan felt another piece of his childhood shifting. Every Thursday, every single week, his father had gone somewhere else before coming home, somewhere he never talked about. Mary looked at Daniel. You still carry the guilt. Daniel sighed. I earned it. No. Her voice became firmer. You didn't. Ethan looked between them. What guilt? Neither answered immediately. Mary finally spoke. The mission. Daniel slowly sat back down. I changed our route. Ethan frowned. What? The explosion. Daniel's shoulders slumped. It happened because of me. The words hung in the air. I told everyone to take the shortcut. Silence. I thought it would save time. His hands shook. It cost lives. So my father blamed himself because he couldn't save everyone. Daniel finished the sentence. And I blamed myself because they followed me. Mary nodded gently. You both carried something that wasn't yours alone. Daniel didn't respond. After a few minutes, Mary quietly excused herself. Before leaving, she squeezed Daniel's shoulder. It's good someone finally found you. When she was gone, Ethan leaned back. My father never hated you. Daniel smiled sadly. I know. Then why disappear? Daniel looked toward Ranger. I tried building a life. His hand rested on the old shepherd's neck. I got married. Ethan smiled faintly. What happened? For a while, Daniel's face softened. Everything was good. He pulled another photograph from the backpack. A younger Daniel stood beside a smiling woman. Between them sat a German shepherd, not Ranger, another dog. His name was Duke. Daniel smiled. Best dog I ever had. Ranger wagged his tail as if he understood. My wife loved him more than she loved me. Ethan chuckled. I've heard that's common. It is. The smile faded. Then she got sick. Ethan's expression changed. Cancer. Daniel nodded once. We fought it for 3 years. He looked at the table. We lost. The room became quiet again. Medical bills took the house. My pension wasn't enough. I sold everything. He looked down at Ranger. Except my dogs. Ethan noticed the wording. Dogs? Daniel nodded. Duke passed away 2 winters ago. His hand rested gently on Ranger. He was Duke's last puppy. Ranger leaned against him. He's all I've got left. Ethan looked at the shepherd. The dog's muzzle had turned almost completely white. His steps were slower than they should have been. One ear stayed folded from an old injury. But his eyes never stopped watching Daniel. Loyal until the end. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about his own father. About all the Thursdays. About the lies that had never really been lies. Just pain, hidden behind ordinary routines. He quietly asked the question that had been building inside him. If my father wanted you to find me, Daniel slowly nodded. He did. Then why didn't you? Daniel looked ashamed. I came once. Ethan froze. What? It was after the funeral. You were there? Daniel nodded. I stood across the street. Ethan searched his memory. Rain, black umbrellas, dozens of people. He had been 16, angry, lost. I never saw you. You weren't supposed to. Daniel reached into the backpack one last time. At the very bottom sat a small wooden box wrapped in an old towel. He lifted it carefully, almost reverently. I brought this with me that day. Ethan stared at the box. I couldn't bring myself to walk over, so I left. He placed the box on the table. I've carried it ever since. Ethan slowly lifted the lid. Inside lay a military medal, several faded photographs, a pocket watch with cracked glass, and beneath them, a folded document bearing his father's signature. Across the top, in bold military print, were words Ethan had never seen before. Recommendation for the Medal of Honor. His hands stopped moving. He looked up at Daniel in disbelief. My father was nominated? Daniel nodded. But that's not the part he wanted you to know. Ethan unfolded the rest of the document. Halfway down the page, another name appeared. Not Michael Caldwell, Daniel Brooks. Both names, side by side. And suddenly Ethan realized the greatest act of courage that day hadn't belonged to one man alone. The paper trembled in Ethan's hands. He read the names again. Sergeant Michael Caldwell, Staff Sergeant Daniel Brooks. Side by side, one recommendation, one act of courage. He looked up slowly. My father never told anyone. Daniel gave a small smile, because he wouldn't accept it. What? He refused the recommendation. Ethan blinked. Why would anyone do that? Daniel leaned back, because they wanted to separate us. The words settled heavily between them. The Army wanted to recognize your father alone. Daniel looked at the document. He told them they couldn't write the story that way. Ethan's eyebrows drew together. He said if they were going to honor anyone, Daniel's voice softened. They had to honor every man who fought that day. He tapped the paper gently. They wouldn't. So he turned it down. Ethan stared at the signature. It was unmistakably his father's. Strong, confident, final. He never wanted to be remembered as the hero. He wanted to remember the men who didn't come home. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with understanding. Ethan closed the wooden box carefully. My whole life, he shook his head. I thought my father was just an ordinary man. Daniel chuckled. He would have loved hearing that. Why? Because that's exactly how he wanted you to see him. A soft bark broke the moment. Ranger struggled to his feet. His legs wobbled. Daniel immediately knelt beside him. Easy, buddy. The old shepherd tried to take another step but stumbled. Ethan was already beside them. Something's wrong. Daniel gently stroked the dog's neck. He's been slowing down. When was the last time a vet saw him? Daniel hesitated. It's been a while. A while meaning? Daniel looked away. I couldn't afford it. Ethan didn't ask another question. He simply pulled out his phone. Within minutes, a luxury SUV was waiting outside the hotel. Daniel looked uncomfortable. You really don't have to keep doing this. I'm not doing it because I have to. They helped Ranger into the vehicle. The shepherd rested his head on Daniel's lap during the drive. His breathing had become shallow. No one spoke much. Some moments didn't need words. The emergency veterinary clinic moved quickly. Technicians gently carried Ranger inside. Daniel started to follow, but a receptionist stopped him. We'll take good care of him. The waiting room suddenly felt enormous. Daniel sat with both hands clasped together. For the first time all day, he looked frightened. Ethan sat beside him. I've never seen you this nervous. Daniel forced a smile. I've buried enough friends. He swallowed. I don't think I can lose another. An hour passed, then another. Finally, the veterinarian walked in. She carried a gentle expression that told them everything before she spoke. He's dehydrated. Daniel nodded. I figured, but that's not the biggest concern. She knelt beside them. Ranger has a serious heart condition. Daniel closed his eyes. How long? With treatment, She smiled softly. He could still have good time. And without it, the doctor didn't answer immediately. He doesn't have much. Daniel thanked her quietly. After she left, he stared at the floor. I can't ask you. You don't have to. Ethan walked to the front desk before Daniel could stop him. When he returned, Daniel looked up. What did you do? I paid for everything. You shouldn't have. I know. Daniel laughed through wet eyes. You sound just like your father. That sentence hit Ethan harder than anything else that day. For the first time in years, he smiled without forcing it. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. Not overnight, not magically, slowly. Daniel moved into a small guest cottage on Ethan's property. Not because Ethan insisted, because Daniel finally stopped saying no. The cottage overlooked a quiet lake. Ranger spent his mornings sleeping on the porch in the sun. Neighbors waved. Children stopped to pet him during evening walks. For the first time in years, Daniel had an address. He had a bed. He had people who noticed if he wasn't around. But Ethan noticed something else. Every Tuesday morning, Daniel disappeared. He left before sunrise, returned after lunch, never explained where he'd gone. Ethan respected his privacy, until one Tuesday, curiosity got the better of him. He followed. Daniel drove nearly 40 minutes outside the city, past shopping centers, past neighborhoods, finally stopping at a small military cemetery. He climbed out carrying fresh flowers. Ethan stayed back, watching. Daniel visited one grave, then another, not just one friend, dozens. He knelt at every headstone, sometimes speaking, sometimes sitting in silence, sometimes simply brushing leaves away from the engraved names. An elderly groundskeeper walked over to Ethan. You know him? Ethan nodded. I'm getting to. The man smiled. He comes every week. For how long? The groundskeeper thought for a moment. Almost 20 years. Ethan looked toward Daniel. Every week? Rain, the old man shrugged. Snow, heat, never misses. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. His father had visited Daniel every Thursday. Now Daniel spent every Tuesday visiting the men who never came home. Some promises simply changed shape. That evening, Ethan finally asked, Why Tuesday? Daniel looked surprised. You followed me. I did. Daniel smiled. I figured you eventually would. So? Daniel looked toward the sunset. Tuesday was the day we lost them. He looked down at his hands. If somebody remembers your name. My company has buildings and businesses. Months passed. One afternoon, Ethan stood inside the headquarters of Caldwell Technologies. Employees filled the auditorium. News cameras lined the back wall. No one knew why the billionaire had called an all-company meeting. Ethan walked onto the stage. He wasn't wearing his usual expensive suit. Instead, he wore his father's old military watch, the cracked one from the wooden box. Behind him appeared a large photograph. Michael Caldwell, Daniel Brooks, two young soldiers smiling beside a German Shepherd puppy. The room became silent. Ethan looked across hundreds of employees. My company has buildings, he paused. Products, investments. But today, he smiled toward Daniel, who sat quietly in the front row beside Ranger. I wanted to have a memory. People leaned forward. My father believed that no one should be left behind. He took a slow breath. I recently learned he spent years quietly helping someone who once saved his life. Daniel lowered his head. Ethan continued. And I realized something. We celebrate success. We celebrate wealth. We celebrate innovation. But too often, he looked directly into the cameras. We forget the people who carried this country before us. The screen changed. A new logo appeared. The Caldwell Brothers Initiative, named not after relatives, but after two brothers by choice. The program would provide housing assistance, job placement, mental health counseling, service dogs, emergency financial support, and long-term care for homeless veterans across the country. The audience rose to its feet, not because a billionaire donated money, because they finally understood why. Reporters rushed forward after the announcement. One young journalist stopped Daniel. "Sir," she held out a microphone. "What does this moment mean to you?" Daniel looked uncomfortable. He had never liked attention. He glanced at Ethan, then down at Ranger. Finally, he answered, "It means," his voice stayed calm, "my brother finally came home." The interview spread across the country. People shared the photograph. Veterans recognized faces. Families sent letters. One envelope arrived without a return address. Inside was another old photograph. The rescue helicopter, taken seconds after the mission. For the first time, Ethan saw what his father had never described. Michael wasn't carrying Daniel. Daniel was helping Michael walk. Both men were bleeding. Both were barely standing. Each was holding the other upright. No hero, no sidekick. Just two exhausted soldiers, refusing to leave the other behind. On the back of the photograph, someone had written one sentence: "Neither man made it home alone." Ethan framed the picture, not in his office, in the lobby of the new Veteran Center, where everyone could see it. A year later, the center welcomed its 1,000th veteran. Some stayed for a week. Some found jobs. Some reunited with family. Some simply needed someone to know their name. Daniel greeted every single one. He never stood behind a desk. He stood at the front door, offering a handshake, a smile, sometimes just a bottle of cold water, because he never forgot how much that simple kindness could mean. Ranger lived long enough to watch it all. He spent his afternoons stretched across the lobby floor, while veterans scratched behind his ears and children read books beside him. When Ranger finally passed away peacefully one quiet autumn morning, he was buried beneath a large oak tree overlooking the lake. His collar rested beside him, so did one worn tennis ball. A small stone marked the place. It didn't mention awards or pedigree. It simply read Ranger. He never left his partner behind. Every Memorial Day after that, Ethan and Daniel stood together beneath the American flag outside the Veterans Center. Neither needed to say much. Some silences carried more meaning than words ever could. As visitors walked through the entrance, they always passed one bronze plaque mounted beside the front doors. Most people stopped to read it. Some wiped away tears before they went inside. The plaque didn't mention billions of dollars. It didn't mention business success. It didn't even mention medals. It simply said, "The strongest people are not the ones who stand alone. They are the ones who refuse to leave someone behind."